How are you today? Good, I hope. And if not, well, maybe this video will make your day better. So over the past week, I've been thinking a lot about what spurred me to start doing videos and contemplating, because it's the beginning of the new year, the new decade, where our life is now versus where it was when I was at my happiest, and where I couldn't wait to wake up every day. Life is good now, but it's different. So I did a lot of contemplating on where our life is now, what it was like then, and what it is that's different. And what I came up with was back in 2007, 2006, 2008, that range. We weren't living where we are now. I was the at-home mom and homeschooling our kids like we do now, but very different focus. A lot was happening economically. 2008, the economy was questionable. And we had already started reading a lot of different books about self-sufficiency, and it's a Mefford thing. So one of the books that popped into my brain was a book I read in 2009 that was lent to me by a friend, and it really revolutionized my thought of what we were doing. We've always liked to do skills. We've always learned to do things ourselves. But reading this book really tied everything together, and the book is called Animal Vegetable Miracle. I have a link to it underneath the video. But this is a really well-written book from a family who was living in Arizona, and water was not plentiful, and they were really questioning their footprint in the world, and the fact that they couldn't get water on a regular basis, and where was their food coming from. And in the desert, there wasn't a lot of local food. So this is a documentation of their journey through an entire year, starting with moving from Arizona out to where they're going. And it says, this is not a how-to book aimed at getting you cranking out your own food. We ourselves live in a region where every other house has a garden out back. But many urban people, the idea of growing your food must seem as plausible as writing and conducting your own symphonies for your personal listening pleasure. If that is your case, think of the agricultural parts of this story as a music appreciation course for food. Acquainting yourself with the composers and conductors can improve the quality of your experience. Knowing the secret natural history of potatoes, melons, or asparagus gives you a leg up on detecting whether those in your market are wholesome kids from a nearby farm or vagrants who idled away their precious youth in a boxcar. Knowing how food is grown is to know how and when to look for them. Such expertise is useful for certain kinds of people, namely, the ones who eat, no matter where they live or where they grocery shop. So this book is written to everybody. It's not written to just people who own land. At the time that I was introduced, we had an acre and a half, but there was nothing on it. It was a yard and brush. There wasn't really anything there. But we've had times that we've lived in apartments where we didn't have the option to have a garden. Those were sad years. So the drift away from agricultural roots is the natural consequence of migration from the land to the factory, which is as old as the Industrial Revolution. So she goes through some of the background, and I've just started rereading this. But it's very inspiring because she puts out a challenge to question, where does your food actually come from? And as we pondered that, it really spurred our interest in trying to find our food more locally. And that was a really thrilling adventure. So we're going to kind of restart that. And one of the first things we did was starting to have worm compost, because I think when I read this book the first time, it was the middle of winter again. And we were itching to do stuff on the land, but You can't get out there in January, especially in upstate New York, because there was probably 3 feet of snow on the ground. So what can you do? Well, worms you can get year-round pretty much anywhere. So that's what we started with. And that's what I'm going to teach you about today. So there's 2 books that I have on my bookshelf. This is the book I got from my grandfather. This has been one of the best gifts I've ever had or gotten. This is the Encyclopedia of Organic Gardening. This is published in 1978, if I believe, 1976, sorry. So yes, it is dated, but I personally think some of the newer books don't have near as much information. They're all about glossy pictures, and there's not a lot of actual how-to in it. So I went back to this book for composting with earthworms. For the small gardener, this method of compost making is recommended. While earthworms breed, they work with the raw materials in their boxes and turn it into a rich, fine compost in only 60 days. That's pretty impressive. So by the time we're ready to hit the garden, we're going to have a lot of compost. This does not have the disadvantages of compost made outdoors, which has the objection of resting on an earth bottom and which is open to the air. In the boxes, put a mixture of raw materials. A typical mixture would be about 70% weeds, leaves, grass clippings, etc., and about 15% manure and 15% topsoil. If no manure is available, parts of your table waste can be substituted. You can try almost any formula. And I see YouTubers out there saying you have to use this, you have to use that. There's a lot of combinations. Get creative. Try different things. Worms just like to eat it. Whatever you put in there. First, it is advisable to start with purchased earthworms as they thrive best under domestic conditions. Check. We have worms. Secondly, before placing them in boxes, mix all the ingredients thoroughly. This will prevent the high heating which takes place in the regular compost heaps. Don't let the heaps get too hot, or else the earthworms will either leave or perish. If you've ever had a compost worm bin in your house and you see worms crawling out, you might want to check your compost. The earthworm compost is also rich in the castings or manure of the earthworm, which is superior to animal manures. And if you don't have chickens or ducks or rabbits or cows, you might not have access to manure, so this is great for houseplants, a small flower bed that's just out on your front area. Because it's small, you can use it in an apartment and nobody would even know you had it there. So very versatile. The material in the boxes should be piled to a height of 2 feet and kept sufficiently watered, but do not put too much water in or it will create an anaerobic condition. Just moist. It is the combined action of the earthworm, bacteria, and fungi which produces the best kind of compost. The process takes about 60 days. Then you'll take half of the materials out and fill it up with new raw materials. And again, in 60 days, the new stuff will be completely composted. It is advisable to feed the earthworms with something equivalent to chicken mash, but you can make your own feed using ground leaves, ground grain seeds such as wheat, barley, corn, etc. Simple. Not complicated. No special recipes. Just a little ingenuity. Again, this book, this is the 1976. They have a newer edition out, and I don't think I like it as much. I'm really of the older the book, the better. Yes, there's been some new agricultural advances, but for the most part, they knew what they were doing back in the day because they were depending on that food to help supplement their family. Another great book, Raising Earthworms for Profit. This is another vintage book, originally 1959, reprinted in 1994. This is the 1999 edition. Rabbits and earthworms. You can actually put an earthworm bin underneath your rabbits, and they will take the rabbit manure and the urine and any other compost scraps, and they'll turn it into compost for you. So it's using more than one avenue. This book goes through simple ways to create worm bins. One of the neat things is they've got a picture in here, and it shows hard packed soil that doesn't even hold water. Water just runs off. And then after the worms have been in there, the soil is crumblier and it's starting to be workable again. Earthworms are part of the whole ecosystem in a garden or in a yard. Without them, the soil gets very compact and it's very dead. I don't know what the right word is. Organic gardening is putting life back into the soil. If the soil has no life, you're not going to grow anything in it. You're going to have to use synthetic fertilizers, and you don't need to. You can. It's amazing. If you try this hobby, you can. This tells you how you can sell the worms for bait. You can sell the worm castings. You can sell the compost. So it's a great little sideline. Yes, it's a little dated, but the information in here is fantastic. It's a great, inexpensive way to get started. Well, let's just do this. Okay. So I looked at a couple different systems, and we like to use what we have on hand. Okay, I'm not a proponent of just going out and buying a bunch of stuff, because generally we don't have the budget to do that. Some people can, but I find it's much more efficient and frugal to just use what we have. These are sap buckets. We don't use these for maple syrup anymore. We actually have switched to a sap bag, which we have another video on. But back in the early days when we started doing maple syrup, this is what we used. It's got the little hole there to hang on the tree. So I just pulled these out of storage, and we have 3 of them, because we're going to build a tiered system. So the bottom one is going to be solid, and we're not going to do anything to it. So that'll be the base. Then we need one that has holes in it, so that as the moisture builds, because worms eat and they poop and they pee, we're going to drill holes so that can filter down into the bottom bucket. So the other thing that we have to do is put holes in the lid, because we need air to exchange. You'll notice I put those towards the center. We're going to use red wigglers for this setup. We're going to use, as I said, red wigglers. And they crawl up. So my theory is, if we put these holes towards the center, they don't like to climb across the flat surface. So I'm hoping by having them in the center that we won't end up with worms trying to escape. So this is just a little bit to smooth over. T-Rex said this is a countersink bit. So we're just trying to get all the little plastic bits off. There we go. Perfect. Alright. So we've got this one with holes, and that will go down in here. Okay, and there's no gap at this point, and I can see a gap of about that much for water and moisture to collect. Now, some people add spigots to these. I'm not a fan of a spigot, because you can easily just pull the bucket out and dump it. The spigots add another level of complexity as well that I just don't think you need. And I don't know about you, but I don't have a spigot laying around that'll go inside and outside. I'm sure you could order one, but we're trying to keep this simple. Okay, so we've got that first one done, and now we're going to drill holes in this one as we did for the first one. Okay, now unlike the lid, which we put the holes towards the center, on the bottoms we have these along the outside edge, because as the red wigglers climb up the side of the bucket, we want them to move to the next level. Okay? And then that will stack inside like so. Okay, that's the theory. So we'll set this one aside because we don't need it yet. But in the next 30 days, we're going to use that. Again, empty bucket, holes in the bottom. So now we are going to make a living environment for our worms. We're going to take some of this awesome Mefford and Devers hay, and it goes in first, fluffy material. Okay, here's my water. We're going to add some water to it. Okay. Now we've got 2 items that we can use. This is rabbit manure from our rabbit, and we've got kitchen scraps, coffee grounds, leftover vegetable, eggshells, and we can just start putting this in. It's amazing, they'll eat any and all of it. You don't have to be picky. Okay, and we're going to put just a little bit of the manure. We're going to spritz it just a bit. Now we're ready to add some red wigglers. So we actually had quite the field trip today. You can order red wigglers online and wait for them to come in the mail, but in January I was a little concerned they'd end up frozen. So we went to 5 different stores looking for worms, thinking, can't be that hard. Well, at the 5th store we finally found red wigglers. And these little guys were, I think we paid about $4 per container. You can get them cheaper. I have a link online right below this video where you can get a whole 250 red wigglers for like $15. It's a really good deal. But I figured this will get us going. They're not looking fabulous, so I'm going to give them a little spritzer. And we're just going to drop them in. Being moist is very important to the worms. Not wet, but moist. If they dry out, they just won't do well. You can see they're kind of in a mass. This isn't for the faint of heart. If you don't like baiting your own hook for fishing, you probably wouldn't like what I'm doing, but it's just God's creatures. You know, if it wasn't for the worms and the beetles, we would never have anything broken down. All the forests would still be around, the trees, and it just amazes me. So these guys are going to turn all of this into yummy, yummy stuff. Okay. So we're going to put a little bit more. And I have in here, this is shredded newsprint. So I'm going to put some of that on and spritz it. Light and fluffy above them. And this was only 1 Sunday paper. I mean, and it wasn't even a big Sunday paper. So you get quite a bit for what you need. And now these guys should be good and happy. We'll check on them every couple days, and we'll keep adding compost to our unit here as we have it. Okay, so there's 1 compost bin made. And as I said before, as they eat through that, and you can always add this bucket. And we bought foam at the local hardware store because one of the unique things about red wigglers, as I said, is they do climb. So if I stack this here, there's this gap. So we bought this to snake in around. So you can just feed it in there and that'll help fill that gap so that the worms don't come up and out. Okay? We found it. So I gotta share this with you. It was really funny. It says, yeah, our worms catch fish or die trying. Well, there will be no dead worms here today. We are giving them a new lease on life, as it were. Okay. So we'll take that off, and we'll put this off to the side. Okay. So the second method, which is the method that we used years ago, and I still like because it's just self-contained, and you can do quite a bit of volume. You can have a couple of these going. So let's start drilling holes. Okay. Now in this one I put holes in the side because this bin is not going to have the red wigglers. This is going to be a bin, and again, this is one of those things we had around the house. It's kind of dusty, you can see that. We're going to use night crawlers for this bin. They don't crawl up like the red wigglers do, so, and we can fill this one a little deeper to house all the rest of the worms. Start with our hay in the bottom. I love the smell of hay. Reminds me of summer. And adding a generous amount of the hay will help as the moisture and the worm urine, I guess, will help it be up off the bottom. I'm going to put a little bit of... Because remember, the book said whatever proportion, and I think we're good. I think we've got the 70% as... Oh, you know what I didn't put in the last one? But we did manure, so I think we're good. The other thing that they mentioned was you could put oats. So I'm going to put some oats in this one, just to change it up a little bit. And we've got quite a bit of night crawlers. So we're going to... See, you can see in here. I think you can see in here. So, it's not pretty. The eggshells we're just going to mash up. Yes, the eggshells help the worms digest. Okay, so now we've got our base. We're ready to put the worms in. And again, I didn't do a spigot in this one. These are baby night crawlers. And this, can you see that in there? Those are worm castings. That's not soil. They've already eaten everything that was in their little container. So that right there is dry, crumbly worm castings. So these guys are very much looking for a new home. Because they're hungry. Oh, nom 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 nom. Look at those. Happy worms. You have a new lease on life. Yay! I got another one of those. And again, same deal. They're hungry. It's going to take them a moment to figure out that there's food in here. Yep. Okay, and the last This is the big worm, Canadian crawlers. Those are the flat tail ones. These are big night crawlers. These are adults. So those are what they call breeder size. So one of the interesting things is if you want to help rebuild your soil in the garden, as these guys eat all of this material, as they devour it and turn it into yummy stuff, they will lay eggs, and there will be baby worm castings. Castings? No, casings? I don't remember. Eggs. And so once you get to the point where you're separating out the worms from the compost, if you use that compost in your garden, it's full of earthworm eggs. And those will help your soil when they hatch and start rebuilding your soil. Right on target. We put a lot of worms in here, so I want to make sure we have enough material, and then we'll start layering this one as well, just like the other one. Alright, there we go. In not very long time, we now have 2 containers, and every 60 days, these guys, you can separate out the worms, and you can separate out the castings, and start the process over again. So if you've got a big tub or even the little one, you're well on your way to having amazing garden soil for your plants. Your tomatoes will never be better than when you have worm compost. Everything just grows better with the worm castings. If you're not a handy person and using a drill and making a mess in your space is not your cup of tea, I put a link below. There's several really awesome worm farm apparatus. Some are more expensive than others, but I put a link to 2 that I know personally people who have used them, and they like them a lot. So check that out. We'll check in at another date on how these guys and gals are doing. I guess I always say, no matter how bad your day seems, somehow it's all good. See you later. So, we told you we'd check in. We were anticipating checking in a little bit later than 24 hours, but it has been 24 hours. We just were checking on the worms to make sure everybody's happy and good, and unfortunately, we forgot a step last night. Pretty big step. We had the topsoil, and it was sitting off to the side, but it was still partially frozen, and I just forgot to put it in. So we went back through, and like it said in the book, we mixed it in so that it's more mix, and then the hay is just sitting on top. And that seems to be a much better setup. So when you make your bin, just remember to add either peat moss or topsoil into the mix, so there's no dry spots, and it more resembles soil that they would find in the garden. We'll check in on another video. We're going to give this 30 days. We'll come back in 60 days, so keep watching. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss anything.